Looks like a conversation going here. It's called Looking at My Mind. It's on Thursday, November 3rd, 2005. So something was up with Regina. We'll see what it was. Thursday, November 3rd, 2005. Yesterday, something came up for me. I was listening to one person talking to another, and I perceived badgering. I remember.
What is badgering?
Badgering would be, it's kind of what a lawyer does to a witness on the stand when he's trying to get the witness to admit something. He badgers him, he hammers and hammers him with questions. Not nice.
Not nice.
Okay, and this actually happened in Pal Talk, if I remember correctly. It was a teacher badgering a student in Pal Talk. Okay, so here we go. If I remember correctly, I could be wrong as we go on, but I think that's what this is. Yesterday, something came up for me. I was listening to one person talking to another, and I perceived badgering. Then, I perceived the one who had seemed to be responsible for the badgering to brag and to be dishonest. Yes, I remember this day distinctly. This seemed to come up for me in a very big way, and that is no lie. What happened for me was that I was listening to a teacher in Pal Talk, and it was a teacher that I knew on a personal level, and so I heard this teacher tell a lie, and I knew it was a lie. And that was very, very, very difficult for me because, the person was standing up in Pal Talk as a teacher of God. And I remember my heart started beating so hard, it was beating right out of my chest. I was shaking. I could hardly breathe. I don't think I even heard much of what was said after that because the blood was just filling up my head. So when I say this came up for me in a very big way, I'm very serious. So let me start again, but that's what's going on. So yesterday something came up for me. I was listening to one person talking to another, and I perceived badgering. Then I perceived the one who had seemed to be responsible for the badgering to brag and to be dishonest. This seemed to come up for me in a very big way. I felt confused, lost from the Holy Spirit, and afraid. Immediately, I knew that I had something to look at. So I grabbed a friend that I thought I could share these perceptions with, and I began sharing the thoughts that I noticed in my mind. One thing that I observed that seemed to cause a lot of fear was the concept of honesty. And Danielle, I must have taught this before because I think this is the story you're saying that you heard me teach on CD just a few days ago. I think you heard this story, so here we go again. One thing that I observed that seemed to cause a lot of fear was the concept of honesty. I noticed that I felt pride regarding my own level of honesty, and that I felt I could judge this person on what I perceived to be dishonesty. I knew that the concept of honesty as a criterion for judgment was something I needed to let go of. But I did not feel immediately willing to let go of that concept. It was like prying something very precious from my grasp. I was raised to value honesty highly. And certainly somebody standing up as a teacher of God. Now, by the way, I want to say that everything I'm saying now is ego, just in case anybody is confused, because this is a very righteous ego, so it can be confusing. But I certainly expected anybody who would stand up as a teacher of God would most definitely be honest to the best of their ability. Now, none of us are perfectly honest. But there's a difference between out and out lying and accidentally lying because you aren't able to be completely honest with yourself yet. And what I observed was an out and out lie. And I knew it was a lie. So this was very, very difficult for me to hear a teacher of God stand up in Pal Talk and just lie. And it was also very clear to me by my emotional reaction that I was judging. There's no doubt about it. And I also knew it was very clear to me that any criterion that I thought I had that enabled me to judge was an error, which meant honesty as a criterion for judgment was an error in the mind. And that was very hard for me to accept, because it did seem to me, based on my value system, that lying was very, 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 very wrong, especially as a teacher of God. And it was very hard for me to accept that I needed to let go of this criterion for judgment and see my brother as a teacher of God lying and see him innocent. This was not easy for me. This was not easy for me. But I did know that's what I had to do. I knew it because I could, I could tell by my reaction that I was totally an ego. And if I wanted to continue awakening, if I wanted to see innocence everywhere I looked, if I wanted to know myself and my brothers as we truly are, I could not hold on to honesty as a criterion for judgment. But it was like prying something very precious from my grasp. So as I continue, however, I did find a little willingness to let go of this concept, and that's based on what I just told you all, because I knew that this was judgment, and I knew I had to let go of judgment in order to awaken. So as much as I valued honesty, I could clearly see that this was my error, and through that I was willing to come up with a little willingness. So I did find a little willingness to let go of this concept, so I gave that little willingness. The rest of the day was guided by the Holy Spirit as my willingness to forgive grew naturally within my mind. By this morning, so I'm actually writing this the next morning, by this morning I was able to sit down and have the following conversation with Holy Spirit. And I will tell you that I was still pretty upset the next morning. So the conversation we're about to hear, I think Holy Spirit's going to be working with me in a pretty strong and pretty direct way, and that's because I'm still pretty upset. But compared to how upset I was originally, I'm quite calmed down, because this was a highly upsetting event for me. Not at all mild at all. Not at all mild. So here we go. Spirit started the conversation. What are you feeling? And here's my answer. This shows you how upset I was. Fear that death is all there is. Now that's a pretty big statement, but I'll tell you where it is coming from. And Laurent knows this about me, so this probably won't be too surprising to him. My biggest fear is that the truth is not true. My biggest fear is that the world is all there is, and spirituality and God is the dream. Okay, that's my biggest fear. And I seem to be actually getting much better with that, I think. I haven't had any big upsets from that in quite a while. But before I looked at this fear, and before I really focused on letting it go through resting the mind when it came up, certain things would trigger it. And a teacher of God lying in the way this man lied triggered it, because it made it seem like, to me, in my mind, with my fears, that the whole damn thing is just a lie. You know, anybody can just get up and lie, you know, and teach and lie and teach and lie. It was quite upsetting for me, like I'm saying. So I went from hearing this lie and pal talk to the whole thing's bullshit. And fear that death is all there is. You know, this is where I went. So Spirit says, what are you feeling? And I said, fear that death is all there is. And then I wrote in parentheses here, this is how strong this doubt grew to be in my mind. If this one could lie, could I trust anything? And Spirit said, but if death is all there is, how is it that I exist? And I said, maybe a better way of saying it is that I am afraid that there is no all that is. And Spirit said, this fear points to the metaphysics of the Course, which says that this is what you believe. This is the thought that must be healed. Since you see this thought in your mind now, are you willing to give faith that this thought isn't true? Are you willing to trust me and be healed? And for me, at this point, again, very upset, the key word in those two questions was willing.
Are you willing?
Are you willing? Yeah, because I was pretty upset. But he's... Go ahead.
But he knows exactly. He's a wonderful coach, you know. He gets you, okay, that's the biggest one now. Are you willing?
Yeah, exactly.
It's very good. It's very good.
Are you willing to give faith, and are you willing to trust? He's not saying, do you have faith, and are you trusting? Because the answer would have been no.
Because he knows you are. And so he's very happy that you're facing the big one now.
The big one now.
Good, excellent. Are you willing? Yes? Okay, let's go.
Yeah, and of course you'll see that I said, yes, I give my willingness. And then he said, what else are you noticing? And my answer was, guilt. I see my brother as guilty of being willing to be dishonest with others so he can see himself as special. In this judgment, I feel above him because that is something I feel I would not do. And this is a very, very common ego trick. And we all fall for it in one way or another when we're able to point the finger at someone else and say, I would never do that. And this is something that I was able to point my finger and say, I would never do that. And I knew that I was right. I knew that I would never go in and lie like the lie I had just heard. I would never do that. And so it did give me a feeling of righteousness, a feeling of better than. He is the guilty one. I would never do that. Right? So this is what I'm saying now. I see my brother as guilty of being willing to be dishonest with others so he can see himself as special. In this judgment, I feel above him, because this is something I feel I would not do. Spirit, your brother is innocent. Is this a thought you are willing to accept? And I said, yes. Spirit, you see yourself, your brother, other brothers, and the truth as separate from one another. And you see your brother as guilty of being responsible for the death of innocent ones. And you could say that I saw this brother, this one that I knew was lying, I saw him as being guilty of misleading others. In fact, what I saw as I knew that he was telling a lie, I saw others responding to him, giving him exactly what he wanted, putting him way up on the pedestal, talking about how great he was. And so I really felt that he was misleading people and they were falling for it. And again, I was extremely upset. But this is what Spirit is referring to. He's talking about the way I was perceiving, of course through ego, but the way I was perceiving. He said, you see your brother as guilty of being responsible for the death of innocent ones. This is a projection of metaphysical guilt. This is the projection that made the world. Rejoice that you see it, for now you can choose to let it go. So Holy Spirit is saying, let's be very, very, very happy that right now we are very clearly seeing how you project guilt. Let's be happy about this because we're looking right at it. And while we're looking right at it, we can choose to let it go. But you can't let it go if you aren't looking at it. So this is a great circumstance that has brought this to your attention so clearly. Holy Spirit continues. Ask yourself this. Are you willing to trust me? Are you willing to be healed? Are you willing to know yourself as only love? Are you willing to know that love is all that is? And of course, I was saying in my mind yes to each of these. And then Holy Spirit says, then, are you willing to let go of the belief in guilt, a belief that made the illusion you see? Forget not that it is an illusion. Forget not that it is the projection of an ego mind that believes in guilt. Forget not that you have chosen to let go of illusion and see with light. Release what you think you saw as untrue, as a trick, something that seemed real but is only the projection of a misperception. Forgive the misperception and be willing to love the projection that represents your brother. Love him not for what he seems to be, but for what he is. Now I want to go over this paragraph again. He says, release what you think you saw as untrue, as a trick, something that seemed real, but is only the projection of a misperception. And the way that I understood this statement was not the projection of an individual mind at all. For instance, I did not understand this as a projection of the Regina mind that created this teacher lying, which I think sometimes is a misunderstanding that gets in the mind as we study A Course in Miracles and projection. When I heard this, I understood that the entire ego was a projection of misperception, and that my brother, who was in Pal Talk lying, wasn't doing anything differently than what I was doing when I was getting upset at his lying. And this is what is key, because this is where I see my brother and me as the same. Okay, so this is what is key. It appeared that he was doing something very different. He was lying, something I would never do. And it appeared that I was upset because he was doing something so awful that brought up all of my fears. Okay, so it appeared we were doing two very different things, but we were both doing the exact same thing. We were both listening to the projection of ego, or said another way, we were both listening to ego thoughts in our own mind and then acting in form based on those thoughts. So my brother, who appeared to be telling a lie so that people would think that he was special, obviously was listening to ego thoughts. There was obviously a fear in his mind. Typically we call it the fear of unworthiness, the opposite of specialness, and he's trying to feel very special, so he's telling this lie and he's getting attention, but he's listening to ego. Well, what am I doing when I'm judging him and when I'm getting all upset? I'm doing the exact same thing he's doing. I'm listening to ego. So that's all my brother and I are doing. We are both misperceiving who we are. We're both believing the ego projection, and we are both acting on that projection. I was doing nothing different from him. And this was very important for me to see, because as long as I saw my brother as different from me, as long as he was in Pal Talk doing something I would never do, I could not forgive him. But as soon as I saw that we were doing the exact same thing, that his error and my error was the exact same error, I saw his innocence and I saw mine. So again, release what you think you saw as untrue. What I thought I saw was somebody doing something I would never do, someone who was guilty and I was innocent. Release what you think you saw as untrue, as a trick, something that seemed real, but is only the projection of a misperception. Forgive the misperception. The misperception was that he and I shared was the belief that we were something other than what we thought we were. We shared that misperception. Forgive the misperception and be willing to love the projection that represents your brother. So he's asking me to look right at this person. I'll call him Henry. He's asking me to look right at Henry and love him. Love Henry. Realizing that he's just a symbol that I can reach out and touch, that I can see, but he's just a symbol of the brother that Henry really is. So he's asking me to look right out there and love Henry. Love the projection that represents my brother. Love him not for what he seems to be, but for what he is. So not for the seeming projection, not for that, but for what it represents, which is our truth, the Christ. It is through this willingness that miracles are ushered into your awareness. And it is through miracles that you are healed. And of course, a miracle, as you know, is a shift in perception. And hopefully, as you heard me tell this story, you can see that the shift in perception did occur because I went from seeing someone who was very guilty, from feeling very righteous myself, I would never do that, to seeing us both as making the same error and as being innocent. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
There's a question here.
Okay, let's have a peek. We're right here.